everyone, welcome back to another Masterclass Explainer. I am super pumped you're joining us today because we're diving into part 47 of our series. We're focusing on a highly specific, kind of misunderstood, but incredibly valuable area of medical coding: interprofessional consultations. We're talking CPT codes 99446 through 99452. So if you've ever found yourself wondering exactly how to document and bill for those complex, behind-the-scenes, provider-to-provider EM services, you are absolutely in the right place. All right, let's jump right in.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with an intro to interprofessional consults, then move into verbal and written time codes, written only and requesting codes, the super strict 14-day exclusion rule, and wrap up with audit guardrails and documentation. All right, Section 1. Intro to interprofessional consults. Let's lock down the clinical purpose here.
Picture this specific scenario for a second. You've got a treating provider, maybe it's a primary care doc, who really needs some expert management advice from a consulting specialist, like a cardiologist or an endocrinologist. They're collaborating, sharing patient data, discussing the case, all that good stuff. But here's the kicker. The consulting specialist is doing all of this without ever actually having a face-to-face visit with a patient. It's literally provider-to-provider teamwork at its finest. But as you can probably guess, it requires some incredibly specific coding to capture that effort accurately.
And that brings us to how the AMA CPT manual officially defines these interprofessional telephone, internet, or EHR consults. It's an assessment and management service where the treating physician or a qualified healthcare professional explicitly requests the opinion or treatment advice of a specialist. The absolute golden rule here, the entire foundation for these codes, is that the consultant provides this service without any patient face-to-face contact. Because, if they do see the patient in person, boom, we're in a totally different section of the CPT book. Moving right along to Section 2, verbal and written time codes. Let's break these down. Okay, this table right here, it's basically your ultimate cheat sheet for CPT codes 99446 through 99449. Notice how picking the right code for the consulting specialist is entirely driven by their cumulative consultative discussion and review time. It's a really clean, progressive structure. You start at 99446 for 5 to 10 minutes, step up to 99447 for 11 to 20, then 99448 covers 21 to 30 minutes, and finally, you hit 99449 when that cumulative time crosses the 31-minute mark. But wait, here is a massive regulatory gotcha you have to watch out for with this specific block of codes. It's all about how that time is actually spent. More than half of your documented time, over 50%, absolutely must be devoted to the medical consultative verbal or internet discussion itself. If most of the time is just spent silently reviewing data, you can't use these codes. Plus, the whole thing must conclude with both a verbal opinion back to the treating provider and a formal written report. Honestly, missing either one of those completely invalidates the code, and that just leaves your practice wide open for clawbacks in an audit. Nobody wants that. All right, Section 3, written only and requesting codes. Let's look at some alternatives. So, what happens if you don't hit those strict verbal requirements? Well, there's a vital contrast to understand here. Let's check out CPT 99451 first. This one is still for the consulting specialist, but it kicks in when there's 5 or more minutes of total medical consultative time, and it concludes with only a written report, literally no verbal discussion required. Now, on the flip side, look at CPT 99452. This is huge. This code is not for the consultant. It is exclusively for the treating or requesting provider. You'd use 99452 when the treating practitioner spends 16 to 30 minutes in a single day preparing medical records, mapping out referral details, or communicating with the consultant. It's basically a way to balance the scales so both sides of the collaboration get recognized for their hard work. Let's hit Section 4, the 14-day exclusion rule. These are compliance rules you do not want to mess with. 14. I want you to burn this number into your memory today, folks. When you're dealing with interprofessional consults, 14 is the magic number that dictates your strict pre- and post-exclusion rules. Here's exactly how that works in the real world. First, you look backward. The consulting specialist cannot have seen the patient face-to-face within the last 14 days. If they did, well, this is probably just considered post-visit follow-up work, not a brand new interprofessional consult. Second, you look forward. This remote consult cannot result in a face-to-face visit or a transfer of care to that specific consultant within the next 14 days, or at their next available appointment. If the consult is basically just a stepping stone to set up a physical visit, these codes are completely off the table. The time you spent just gets bundled into that upcoming face-to-face visit. And to add another layer, we have some really strict frequency limits to talk about. Say day 1 is when you bill that initial consult. The consultant codes 99446 through 99451 Those max out at once per 7-day interval per patient. You can't just spam these codes every couple of days. Meanwhile, the requesting provider code 99452 has an even tighter restriction. That one can only be reported once in a 14-day period. These guardrails are put there specifically to make sure the codes are used for substantial, highly necessary collaborations rather than just quick everyday check-ins. Finally, Section 5, Audit Guardrails and Documentation. Let's make sure you're bulletproof. We're looking straight at the official AMA CPT guidelines here, and this text is the definitive proof of what absolutely must be formally integrated into your patient's EHR to substantiate these claims. The rules are right there in black and white, and trust me, auditors follow this exact language to the letter when reviewing your charts.
So let's build your ultimate compliance checklist right now. First up, and this is absolutely critical, you must have mandatory documented patient consent, verbal or written is fine, confirming they actually know this behind-the-scenes consults is happening. Why? Because they might be responsible for coinsurance or deductible cost sharing. It's a huge surprise for patients to get a bill for a doctor they technically never met. Next, your notes have to explicitly state the written or verbal request by the treating doc, including the exact medical necessity for it. You also need clear, itemized time logs to justify the code level you selected. And finally, those formal consultant reports have to be permanently integrated right into the patient's EHR.
So let me ask you a question to take back to your clinical team today. Are your current EHR templates actually capturing all these distinct elements? Because if you miss even one of these details, like say forgetting to document the patient's consent, or failing to log if the time was verbal versus just data review, that can completely derail your compliance and lead to some really costly denied claims. You definitely want to take the time to build these prompts directly into your workflows.
And that pretty much wraps up our deep dive into the awesome world of interprofessional E&M codes. But seriously, think about it. How much unbilled revenue is your team leaving on the table right now just because these invisible behind-the-scenes collaborations aren't being documented right? It might be the perfect time for a quick workflow audit. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Decode Healthcare with Harshal.